Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, your home for Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. You can find us on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Make sure that you like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Or, if you'd rather, you can catch us anywhere you get your podcast from. I'm your host, Nick Belsky, joined as always by Nick Warlett, and it's an early morning here as the Penguins kicked off their West Coast swing last night with a 10:30 p.m. start that really started about 10:45 after all the pregame festivities that they had out there in LA, honoring LAFD. Obviously, our hearts and thoughts and prayers go out to all of those affected by the Los Angeles wildfires, but just a great night for the Penguins following everything that happened. Got back into the win column, dominated the LA Kings. We'll break down everything that happened last night at the Crypto.com arena, and then we'll discuss whether or not that's enough to hold off Dubas from a reported, quote, fire sale that he was getting ready for, according to RG.org. We'll cover that and what one insider had to say about the Penguins' short-term future. And then we'll close things out talking about whether or not Crosby's deflection goal from last night is enough to quell concerns about his scoring issues over this entire season. Let's get started on the Tip of the Ice-Burgh. And we're going to kick things off with the Penguins getting a victory last night over a pretty good Los Angeles Kings team. I mean, they said it on the broadcast last night, Josh Getzoff saying that was only the fifth time all season that the Kings had trailed 2-0 in a game. And the Penguins didn't stop there. They end up winning 5-1 over the LA Kings. Sidney Crosby and Evgeni Malkin both light the lamp. The team defense impressed from pillar to post for the first time that I can really remember. They were pretty good defensively. Yeah, they gave up a couple of chances, but all in all, I thought a pretty good game for the Penguins, especially whenever they had a 2-goal lead late in the second period. They scored to make it 3-1. Sorry, they was 3-1. They scored to make it 4-1, and then they scored early in the third to make it 5-1 and just kind of put this away. I was impressed thoroughly by last night's game, and I think no players impressed me more than Anthony Beauvillier. Rickard Rakell leaves the team due to personal issues. Beauvillier steps up in the lineup alongside Crosby and Brian Rust. And my thought was, all right, well, that line was kind of driving all of the offense for the Penguins. Can Beauvillier step in and they just seamlessly continue? And they did, which begs the question, Horwat, is Anthony Beauvillier quietly becoming a very big trade piece for Kyle Dubas and the Penguins?
Trade piece is fun considering when we started this season, he's playing his way into the lineup and you're not taking him out anytime soon. But now the state of the Penguins has turned things into everyone is up for sale. We'll discuss further detail later, but when it comes to Beauvillier specifically, I mean, if that's the direction the Penguins are going in, I would say so. He's once again proving himself to be a solid trade piece. I mean, that's kind of just been his forte over these last few years of just bouncing from team to team. What is it, 5 teams in the last 2 years or something unfun like that? It might go to 6. It hasn't been an enjoyable run for him specifically, but I mean, if he's going to keep this level up and the Penguins are going to continue to struggle, I mean, again, coming off of I don't want to say important win, but every win at this point for the Penguins is important if they're still trying to make the playoffs. But off of an important win against a very good Kings team right now, a very good Kings team that had a ton to play for last night and just kind of got shelled. It was their first game back at home since they had to postpone their game against the Flames. Sad irony there that was the team they had to postpone against. But it's they were gone for a little while, first game back, and they get shelled like that. That's big on the Penguins to come in and do something like that, especially against a team like LA that they don't usually do great against. But Beauvillier now has played in. It's shocking to think he's only missed 1 game this year, considering all the discussions we've had about him. I mean, 11 goals isn't bad. He's got definitely the pedigree to be a trade piece. He's only got the 1-year deal, the show me deal. And if a team finds him useful enough for their bottom 6 for a playoff run or for their hunt, by all means. I mean, you sell high on a player like that.
Yeah, you mentioned he has 11 goals. That's already double his total from last year when he played for 3 different teams in 60 games, where he finished with 5. He has 11 goals already this season. I mean, it just kind of feels like he's playing a jack of all trades role. I mean, we saw it last night. Rickard Rakell leaves the team, and who's the guy that gets bumped up to the first line? Anthony Beauvillier. We've seen him play on the fourth line. We've seen him play with Evgeni Malkin. We've seen him play on a third line that's been thrown together at the last minute. So he's really been a puzzle piece that Mike Sullivan has been able to morph to whatever he wants it to be. And I think that also helps your tradability. And I think that's why you see a guy like Beauvillier get traded a couple times last year. It's not because he is horrible, because he's not, but it's because he is a guy that is adaptable in a lot of different situations. And I think a lot of that goes to starting your career on a Lou Lamoriello New York Islanders based team, a Barry Trotz based team, to where, hey, you're going to have to play that defense first, offense second type of hockey to survive in that organization. And that kind of molds you to be able to, especially if you already have that offensive upside coming into the league, that molds you to be able to be whatever multiple head coaches want you to be. And I think he has been exactly what Mike Sullivan wants him to be. And I think that's why he could be a name that really gets tossed around meaningfully here in the next month or two leading up to the trade deadline, because this is a guy that has shown, hey, it might not always work whenever he gets traded to a new team, but he does still have that talent. He does still have that ability. And what he's shown right now is he still has that offensive upside that he had early in his career with the Islanders.
Yeah, and look at the numbers that he put up before getting to Pittsburgh. I mean, yeah, he played on 3 teams last year. And when you discuss a player getting traded twice in a year, it's usually not for great reasons.
Yeah.
He had 17 points in 16 games. Yeah, that's not great. Look at the literal year before. We're not going back 3, 4 years, 5 years, 2 years, 2022, 2023. Whenever he started the year with the Islanders and got sent to the Vancouver Canucks. In 33 games with the Canucks, he had 9 goals and 11 assists for 20 points. I don't remember the Canucks being a good team that year, but
that's some bunting in Pittsburgh crap right there. Yeah.
He had some good numbers on a, if I'm not mistaken, a not great Vancouver Canucks team to end that season. 6th in the Pacific. Yeah, not good.
Yeah.
And he did good whenever he got there. And before then, he was doing decently enough with the Islanders and playing in a full 82 split between the two teams. He had 40 points. That was 2 years ago. This wasn't 5 years ago. It was just a weird year last year, and being traded twice doesn't help with the numbers, especially whenever one of the teams he played with was Chicago. Everyone's numbers bit it last year in Chicago. Yeah. So I think, last year wasn't great, and the Penguins were able to get him for cheap looking at 17 points in 16 games, and now he's basically already at that through 48. If the Penguins have a trade part, he's also a player that you wouldn't mind keeping around for another year if they're going for it. But if a trade partner's coming along, unfortunate to send him to yet another team in the last 600 days or so, but 'tis the business. And tell you what, he's someone you, like I said, you do sell high on. He has the pedigree in very, very recent memory. I mean, it's a lot of teams in between the Penguins and the Islanders. But it's only, 2 years? That's not long. And clearly there's still something there, and he just hit an unfortunate patch in 23-24.
Yeah, you feel for the player in that situation because it cannot be easy continuously having to restart. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of, military kids out there that are listening to this and saying, yeah, no, I can relate. But no, for Anthony Beauvillier and his family, that's sort of been what life has been like for the last couple of years. I mean, he's been really good for Pittsburgh. So if they choose to keep him, or as we'll talk about, a fire sale doesn't always end up in everybody being traded. Actually, more often than not, it doesn't end up in that being the case. But we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. You mentioned, don't look at Beauvillier's season last year. Look at it 2 years ago. And that's kind of what you're getting this year. That's kind of the version of Kevin Hayes that we're starting to get here since he returned to the lineup after a stretch of healthy scratches. 4 goals in his last 10 games played since returning to the lineup. I think his poise with the puck is certainly something that has been noticeable, and his calm energy and calm demeanor when he has the puck in the offensive zone has been a welcomed addition to the bottom 6, and it's starting to lend itself to helping these younger forwards. I've really enjoyed Kevin Hayes' role on this team starting to kind of grow on the ice. We always know what his role is off the ice. He's one of the best locker room guys the NHL has to offer at the moment. But on the ice, it's starting to lend itself to some of these younger forwards. Cody Glass has goals in 2 of his last 3, and he's finding a rhythm right now. Drew Connor starting to kind of find his footing a little bit. And I think Kevin Hayes has a big part in the reason why some of these young forwards, I mean, Phil Tomasino, who we'll talk about, looking really good in a bottom six role last night, got out there on a shift change and made a big play for Evgeni Malkin. So I really like what a lot of these young players have done, but I'm going to kind of, in my eyes, draw it back to Kevin Hayes and say, since he came back in the lineup 10 games ago, the bottom six has just kind of felt a little bit different, a little bit more dangerous.
Yeah, and Kevin Hayes is playing the position that at least I expected him to play heading into the season. Third line center, maybe he'd at the time play above Lars Eller. And then once Lars Eller got traded, it was still, why isn't Kevin Hayes playing third line center? Why is this kind of the system we're going with? And I get it. He's not the most fleet of foot. We're going to say that all season. But, we're seeing what he can do now with a little bit more of a consistent spot in the lineup. He's scoring in a couple of games here, scored that big goal last night, added an assist, and is helping everyone around him. Like you mentioned, this is exactly where I expected Kevin Hayes to be heading into the season. Third line center, helping the youngsters around him. I don't think I expected the youngsters to be Drew O'Connor and Philip Tomasino right now. But whoever it may be, it is a good, progression for not only Kevin Hayes in this lineup, but the guys that he is supporting as his wingmates and as his locker room mates, just in general, when it comes to adding in Cody Glass into that scenario, maybe Anthony Beauvillier, like we just discussed. And when/if, mostly if he comes back in the lineup, if he can help Puljujarvi out, get some more good looks. I know Pusanen hasn't had a shot this year. Maybe he comes back up at some point after the fire sale. There's all kind of possibilities with these minor league kids that, maybe Kevin Hayes can be another one of those voices to lean on and hear in the room.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head there. That's where I was going next, is if it's working with these guys, with Tomasino, with Glass, that's an important piece to have around whenever you have your young, almost NHL-ready forwards getting ready to make their kind of step into the NHL at some point, whether that be late this season, whether that be next season, because Kevin Hayes is still under contract next year. Guys like Ville Koivunen, guys like a Tristan Brose, guys like a Rutger McGroarty, who between the three of those players have about 4 or 5 games of NHL experience. If Kevin Hayes is proving to not only be able to hold his own, but to be able to kind of bring the best out of some of these other young forwards, that is a great piece to have, kind of welcoming some of your young, talented forwards to the NHL. So I've liked Kevin Hayes' role on the ice, what it's looked like over the last 10 games, and I'm hoping that he continues to build off of that. But with that in mind, there's obviously some rumors that have started, and it's rumors that we hear a version of every single year over the past couple of years, because that's where the Penguins have been at the trade deadline time frame over the past couple of seasons. But according to Mark D'Amico, senior editor for RG.org, a fire sale is imminent for the Pittsburgh Penguins, and president of hockey operations Kyle Dubas is going to be spearheading that effort. Quote, Sid, Malkin, Rust, and the 2 kids, Phil Tomasino and Owen Pickering, they're off limits for now, but everything else can be had for the right price. That's what D'Amico wrote at RG.org via his source with the Pittsburgh Penguins, or close to the Pittsburgh Penguins, I should say. Like I mentioned, we've heard a version of this a lot in recent years. The Pens getting ready for a fire sale, the Pens getting ready to sell the farm. Are you surprised at the timing of these rumors right now?
No, I'm not. I mean, whenever that story was put out, the Pens had 3 wins since returning from the Christmas break. Not good. Not a good stretch, considering we're nearing February. The win counter has only gone to 4. So, again, it was a good game against LA. They'll need to continue stuff like that to really maintain that, and to end stuff like this, to end these sort of conversations that are being had. Regardless of win or lose, it seems like there's going to be trades. I think even Josh Yohe said that a couple weeks ago. Marcus Pettersson is just about as good as gone. As for the rest of the lineup, I think it also turns, I think Yohe also mentioned that essentially everyone who doesn't have a full no move clause is on the move, or could be on the move, or could be sold at the right price. There's some new wrinkles with this piece from Marco, who I trust quite a bit. I've been chatting with Marco quite a lot this season. He sent me quite a few notes throughout the year, and he's knocked a couple things out of the park. One of those being the recent escrow payment thing. He came out with that one first. So you can't take what he says lightly. There's got to be smoke or fire to this smoke. We'll see where it goes. And I mean, for what it's worth, the timing of it doesn't surprise me. Again, 4 wins since coming back from the Christmas break.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to distill it even further, 3-4-3 since the new year, what has that done to the Penguins in the standings? Look at where they were whenever the calendar flipped to January. And both of us sat here on this show and said it. The way that the Eastern Conference was shaping out at that moment, one bad week could put you in a very, very bad position. Well, the Penguins had more than one bad week. They had a horrible homestand that was following up a rough stretch before that since coming back from the Christmas break. And all of a sudden, I mean, I think it was Josh Yohe of The Athletic yesterday as well, who put out, you're closer to a top 5 spot than you are to a wild card spot right now, or a top 5 draft spot than you are to a wild card spot going into yesterday's action. But that makes it very non-surprising, especially with the 2-week Four Nations face-off break that's going to happen and make February feel like a very, very quick month, which is supposed to be the month leading into the trade deadline, which is a busy month for all general managers. So the fact that they're going out on this road trip and then this comes out makes a lot of sense, right? It's kind of a light the fire under them. Hey, by the way, this discussion has started. You're on a road trip. It's time to start making some hay if you're the Pittsburgh Penguins. But I will push back and just say simply, you trust Marco? I trust Marco. Rumors are rumors, so you trust them to your severe level of trust based in the reporter who's reporting them. But fire sale, I know people are going to hear that. And they're going to be like, everybody's gone. Raquel's gone. Patterson's gone. O'Connor's gone. Jari's gone. That verbiage was used last year. And need I remind everybody, the only people that were traded were Jake Gensel, Magnus Hellberg, and Chad Ruhwedel. So just because the rumors are a fire sale is imminent, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to see a fire sale, because, as it should be, Kyle Dubas is not just going to trade people for the sake of trading people.
You're absolutely right about that. I can remember all trade deadline day last year just waiting for other things to happen. The Jake Gensel thing happened the night before. And it just all day trade deadline day was just waiting. There's a trade. Magnus Hellberg. Okay, let's force this one out and move on and continue to wait, just for Kyle to say, that's it. That's all we're doing. It's going to be a bit of a different, it could be different for the Penguins this year just because there is one less year of Crosby, Malkin, Letang. There's one less year of this situation. There is new opportunities growing every day when it comes to trades in the NHL. Tristan Jarry is not going to go anywhere. Kyle Dubas already said he tried working on that one over the summer. Yeah, nothing came of it. That's going to continue, especially with the poor play that we're getting from him. As for, Marcus Pettersson can be had at the right price. That's pretty obvious. Raquel will likely get moved in the summer with the salary cap going up exponentially. For now, it's, like I said, I do take what Marco says. I don't want to say heavily, but I'm looking at it and kind of understanding where all these words are coming from. Essentially saying the only ones locked up right now are Crosby, Malkin, Rust, and Tomasino and Pickering.
Yeah.
Cool. We'll get to
Tomasino in a second. Yeah.
Yeah. But leaving the door open, and for guys like Erik Karlsson and most shockingly, I thought Kris Letang.
Those are the two most notable omissions there. They weren't on the off limits list. And in fact, Marco, specifically mentioned both of those two, saying with Letang, his source said, quote, I don't know right now about Kris Letang. And then also Marco wrote down about Karlsson. Pittsburgh is open to retaining more to get a deal done with Erik Karlsson. So with those omissions to the off limits list, and then of course the additions of those little flavors of insider knowledge there. What are your thoughts on the fact that Letang and Karlsson aren't on the off limits list?
Karlsson doesn't shock me. I mean, what about, like, Pittsburgh fans have kind of wanted Karlsson traded since they got him. It's
A
sort
large
of
portion
been
of that.
so that one doesn't shock me. It's gonna land pretty evenly with the fan base, I'd say, whenever everyone's sort of been asking for it, but also not really. It's been a very mixed bag with Karlsson, and he's on pace for 55 points this year, I think it is. I think it's one less than he had last year. So really, when it comes to offensive defensemen, are we getting it? And as for the Letang thing, because the source said, I don't know, I'm going to label that as he's likely still locked in, just because that's everything we've learned over the years. That's everything that, I've pretty much heard over the years. And, this 1 year isn't going to change much. I think they might still see Letang through at least the Malkin year, whenever his full no move clause does kick and change a bit. And then Montreal will start making the call.
Yeah.
As for Karlsson, again, not totally shocked, because Pittsburgh's kind of been asking for it since he got here. We'll see where it goes. It'll be up to Karlsson to agree to it too. We'll see. And as for the additions, I like Pickering being on that list. Love Pickering being on that list.
That's a no-brainer.
Yeah,
right. He's 20 years old. This guy was your first round pick a couple years ago, and he's expeditedly gotten to the NHL and been pretty good at the NHL level in a lot of very different situations. So that wasn't a surprise. Tomasino, however, I saw Phil Tomasino, I know they just acquired him in November, but why is he such a hot commodity that the Penguins want to make sure that they keep their hands on?
That one I don't know. I mean, whenever everyone discusses who are the Penguins looking for, they immediately go to it's a Phil Tomasino type. Maybe that's why they're kind of looking for the mold of castaways from their team that had pedigree and might still have it because they're young enough and youthful enough and have a ton of NHL left in them to reach again. Maybe that's sort of the pillar. That's the one they're looking at as this is the type they're looking for, and we can't lose the type. They can't lose the prototype, essentially. Here's who we're looking at. Here's who we're hunting for. We need all versions of that. Hence it was after the Cody Glass and Anthony Beauvillier additions, but those were involved in that sort of the Philip Tomasino type. That's why they've been involved with Niels Höglander and amongst other names. I think someone, I forget who, don't quote me on it, may have been Elliot Friedman, said Kirby Doc might be on their sites. Interesting. Or at least linked them to. And just those types, the castaways, that maybe because he's the prototype, that's why you don't want to lose him. As for being part of the untouchables list, that's fascinating. It really is. But if he's playing good, anyone can be on that untouchables list. Like Raquel for this season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's been very, don't get me wrong, I like Phil Tomasino. I like what I've seen out of Phil Tomasino since he came to the Penguins. 9 points in 20 games is not a bad look for a guy who was struggling to score with the Nashville Predators. And of those 9 points, 5 of them being goals doesn't hurt either. Not to mention the kid is 23 years old. He's a pending restricted free agent, so it's club control. So I understand why the Penguins would value him, but it's a very, very hit you in the face whenever somebody says, hey, according to my sources, the Penguins untouchable list goes Sidney Crosby, Evgeni Malkin, potential 40-goal scorer Brian Rust, and Phil Tomasino. And you're just like, oh, wait, really? Like that highly? But it makes sense. I mean, you talk about the prototype. Maybe we need to start making T-shirts, Phil, the prototype Tomasino. But he's been good for the Penguins, and it looks like maybe he's part of that group of, hey, it's Tomasino, it's McGroarty, it's Koivunen, it's Bros. It's this next layer of young forwards that the Penguins are going to task with, hey, bring us back to the light for Sidney Crosby's lean years. Bring us back to the light for the end of Crosby's career. Maybe Tomasino is the wily veteran. Maybe he's the Troy Terry of that group.
Yeah, I can also remember asking Mike Sullivan last year, like, who are there additions to this core with Karlsson now arriving? And he said that the core is more than just 3 players, really. It is more than just the Crosby, Malkin, Letang. You can add a Karlsson to that if you'd like. You can add a Brian Rust to that if you'd like. I think at the time it was before the trade deadline, so he said you can add Gensel to that sort of group. It was a growing, because he likes knowing that there's plenty of guys that make this team, the Pittsburgh Penguins. And if Tomasino is now a part of that sort of, not ironclad, considering the Gensel portion of that, but considering Tomasino can be part of that solid foundation, that's where this team wants to build off of. Again, it's those castaways are going to pick and choose pieces, almost moneyball this a little bit. There's connections because I remember when Kyle got here, I think it was Elliot Friedman again, always discussing Kyle Dubas is a baseball guy too. And I believe there was connections with him and the book that came from Moneyball. So who knows? Maybe there is some Moneyball-esque stuff going on here. Like I said, those castaways that are cheaper, that are here for the analytics. And what can they do? They can get on base.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, maybe the Pittsburgh Pirates need to give them a call. That way they actually do something this offseason. But make no mistake, neither of us are sitting here saying that Phil Tomasino is going to be a pillar of the future for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But in the short term, when you're looking to do that shotgun rebuild or quick retool or quick turnaround to where they can all of a sudden be the Washington Capitals, which if they make the right moves, would still probably be a year, maybe two away from doing. Maybe Tomasino's a guy that sticks around for a while. Maybe Tomasino's a guy that you could feel a little bit more comfortable buying his jersey. At least according to Marco D'Amico, he is untouchable and off limits for this cycle of the trade deadline. But we'll have to keep our eyes on that. Obviously, interesting that this is the first time that we've kind of heard, hey, fire sale. Those words grab everybody's attention. They certainly grabbed mine. They certainly grabbed yours. And they certainly grabbed a lot of the internets, because everybody was talking, man, maybe Crosby to Colorado's happening. And for those people, I'll say this. How about we read the articles whenever they're posted? Because the first name on that off the limits list was Sidney Crosby. Speaking of Sidney Crosby, let's finish it off with a little discussion that I thought of yesterday. And of course, as what always happens, the second you start to doubt Sidney Crosby, he goes and shoves it in your face. I put out this poll yesterday on our YouTube channel at Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Are you concerned about Sidney Crosby's lack of goal scoring? Going into last night, he had 12 goals. And what does he do? He redirects a shot for Matt Grzelcyk in Crosby fashion, immediately shuts down a question that I asked that questioned his ability. 70% said no. And I think whenever you see that, you say, all right, yeah, makes sense. That's an overwhelming majority. 30% said that they're concerned, though, which in my eyes, and again, I'm not trying to make a mountain out of a molehill here, but if 30% of the fan base is saying they're concerned with Sidney Crosby's goal scoring, that to me is more telling than the 70% that said no, because I think there's a large portion of the fan base that no matter what Crosby does, as long as he's above point per game, they're not going to worry about Sidney Crosby. But if 30% are sitting there saying, I mean, the guy has 13 goals. He's on pace to have his worst goal scoring season when it comes to goals per game average in his entire career. Does that concern you at all, Horwat?
I don't. That's tough, because I think it would have in a normal season. Absolutely. Because I mean, in a normal season, there was at least Jake Gensel around to sort of fill the gap. There was not much else, though. It was, especially going into this year, I think we were all, at least I was, looking at Crosby as he needs to find that goal-scoring ability without Jake Gensel there, and without the Penguins going out and getting the quote-unquote replacement, or at least another goal scorer for the lineup to sort of help fill the void.
Yeah,
everyone kind of leaned on Crosby at the end of the last season after Gensel was traded, and he filled in the role pretty nicely. Michael Bunting actually helped quite a bit too. Drew O'Connor helped quite a bit. There was a couple of key names that did sort of add to the goal scoring. Going into this year, it was kind of expected that Sid would take over that goal scoring run, and he hasn't, which again would concern me. But Rickard Rakell's playing darn well, and again, not filling the same void that, Gensel could, who, by the way, I believe is on a 40-goal pace.
Yeah.
Lovely. But it's better than having no one there. So I would be concerned, but with Rickard Rakell playing at a very, very high level to the point of the Penguins don't want to trade him this year. Again, watch out for the offseason.
Mm-hmm.
But during this 24-25 season, they plan on keeping him around. I think the concern level for Crosby goes down a bit, but I absolutely get where 30% of the people are coming from because he was expected to do more.
Yeah, I mean, both Rakell and Brian Rust are
yes,
filling the back of the net at a very, very good level. I mean, Rickard Rakell leads the team with 23 goals. Brian Rust is up to 19 goals. So once again, he's going to be flirting with that 30-goal mark this season. But the difference to me with Crosby is it's not like he's not trying to score goals, because leading into last night's game, he was tied for the team lead in shots on goal over the last 20 games. He had 56 shots over the last 20 games going into last night, and he only had 12 goals all season long. And like I mentioned, he's on pace to have his lowest goals per game season of his career, but that's by far. Going into last night's game, he was on pace to score 0.25 goals per game, finishing with just around 21 goals. That is so far below the line. If you look at the rest of his career, you can count on one hand how many times he was below 0.4, and he's going to finish at 0.25. I mean, you look at his lowest goal total seasons, he had 8 goals in 22 games in 2011-12. He had 15 goals in 36 games in 2012-13. He had 16 goals in 41 games played in 2019-20. And in all of those seasons, there was an excuse for him to be low in goals, specifically because he didn't play. In 2011-2012, he was dealing with his concussion/neck issues. In 2012-13, there was a lockout. So he only played in 36 of the 48 games, or no, there was only 36 games that season. So he only played in 36 games. And in 2019-20, he had a core muscle surgery that cost him the early portion of the season, and then the late part of the season was canceled due to COVID. So in all of these situations, there was either an injury or a lockout or a stoppage of play that caused him to score that low of goals. He hasn't missed a game this year, and he's on pace for 21. To me, there is a little bit of concern there. As much concern as you can have with a 37-year-old that is still on pace to have a point per game, a 37-year-old that is still leading your team in points, a 37-year-old that when he wants to can just turn it on and take over a game. I understand all of these points, but when you look at the big picture, he was, as he mentioned, Horwat, he was expected to elevate his goal scoring this year like he did last year when he finished with 42, because there was that void. Is Rakell helping fill that void? Yes, because he's scoring more than expected. Is Brian Rust helping fill that void? Yes, if he continues on this pace, because he's scoring more than expected. Is Anthony Beauvillier helping fill that void with 11 goals? Yes, because I don't think any of us expected him to finish around the 20-goal mark. That's kind of like a Danton Heinen bonus part right there. That's what you're getting. It's helping fill the void in other spots, but I think you still look at the Penguins and you say, man, what if Crosby was scoring goals just at a career average rate where he was on pace to finish with upwards of 25, 26 goals? What if Evgeni Malkin, who you could throw into this conversation, was scoring goals at his typical 20-plus goal rate? He's not. So maybe you have the conversation about Malkin too, but I think specifically when you look at Crosby, it's that first realization of this guy's human. And this guy is trying to score goals and can't. And not often in his career has Sidney Crosby tried to do something and not been able to pull through. So I think it's that kind of that first moment of, hey, he's human. And we knew it. And I'm sure that there's a chance that over the final 33 games, he goes out and scores 20 goals and just shuts me right up, because I put out a freaking poll and he scored 4 hours later. But I do think that I lean towards the 30% that said yes, saying, hey, there's something here. Whether it's something to be overly concerned about, I don't think we're there yet. But there is something to the fact that Sidney Crosby has not been able to kind of finish his opportunities this year the same way that he has throughout the remainder of his career.
And that's fair. It's the way it's going to be again. As long as his goal scoring is below what is expected, yeah, there's going to be a concern level there. As long as he is still, and that's the thing about Crosby though, is he would much rather have no goals and still see the team win and still help the team win.
Of course.
So it'll all come down to how the team is performing as a whole, and if they are collecting wins. Again, 4 since Christmas, they're not. So there is something that needs to wake up. Like I said, I do have that concern as well. But he's at least sort of had an unexpected help. But in these last couple months of the season, if the Penguins are still gunning for a playoff spot, depending on how the fire sale goes, depending on where the East is stacking up, he'll need to find another level to his goal scoring, especially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think a lot of those concerns go out the door and went out the door when the Penguins were winning. From Thanksgiving to Christmas, they were one of the better teams in the NHL. Sidney Crosby wasn't scored a lot of goals, but nobody cared because they were winning. They haven't been winning since Christmas, and that's why these things start to pop up. These red flags start to get raised, and that's one that I'm keeping my eye on. Now, he scored on Monday night, excuse me. Maybe this road trip is exactly what he needed. Maybe that Southern California heat is going to kind of defrost the old goal-scoring bones of Sidney Crosby in the depths of winter, and maybe it just sends him on a run. I wouldn't be surprised, but as of right now, it's something I'm keeping my eye on, and I think 30% that said yes tend to agree. But that's going to do it for this episode of The Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this one. Remember, you can find us on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, tell all your friends. Or you can catch us anywhere you get your podcast from. We'll see you guys next time.